this time, today we'll call Dr. Chester Gwin.
Gwin, if you would please come to the front of the courtroom. And doctor, before you have a seat, would you please raise your right hand? Swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth.
I do.
Please have a seat. We responded to questions first from Mr. Lewis and perhaps also Mr. Fishburne, who's to your left in the time. You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Doctor. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm well. How are you?
Good, thank you. Please state your name and spell it for the court reporter.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Chester Gwin, Gwin.
And if you can spell your name for the court reporter, please, sir.
First name Chester, Chester. Last name Gwin, Gwin.
All right, how are you currently employed, Doctor?
I'm sorry.
How are you currently employed?
I'm a medical examiner with Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office, also known as the Southwestern Institute of Forensic Sciences.
And how long have you been with Swifts?
I've been employed there full-time since July of 2008.
Okay, and can you describe for the member of the jury your background, training, and experience for your position?
Yes, I obtained my Bachelor of Science degree from Southwestern Adventist University in Keene, Texas. And then that was followed by a medical doctorate degree at Loma Linda University School of Medicine in Loma Linda, California. At that point, I moved to Miami, and I did a 4-year anatomic and clinical pathology residency program at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami Beach, Florida. And then that was followed by a 1-year forensic pathology fellowship at the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office in Miami. I moved here to Dallas in July 2008, took a full-time job here with Dallas County. I took and passed my national board exams in anatomic and forensic pathology, and I hold a Texas medical license.
And what is forensic pathology?
Pathology is the study of disease and disease processes. Forensic pathology is the application of medical legal investigation into death to determine cause and manner of death.
Okay, and as part of your duties as a medical examiner, does that include performing autopsies?
It does.
And what is an autopsy?
An autopsy is an examination of the body after a person has died. There are multiple components to that autopsy. Here in Dallas, we perform complete autopsies, and that includes an external examination of the body and then an internal examination of the body. And that entails actually looking at the chest and abdominal organs and then looking at the brain. We also take several samples for toxicology testing, and then depending on the type of case, we'll take evidence and tissue to look at underneath the microscope.
During the course of your career, practically how many autopsies have you performed?
Approximately 4,500.
And have you testified before as an expert in court in the field of forensic pathology?
I have.
On few or many occasions?
Many.
And did you perform an autopsy on the victim, in this case, Genevive Dawes, under case number IFS-17-01065?
I did.
And when did you perform that autopsy?
That was performed on January 19th, 2017.
Okay. So you talked about how you conduct the autopsy. If you could just talk to us about the external examination that you did on Ms. Dawes' body.
Okay. First, we start with the external examination, and that includes taking as-is photographs. So photographs before anything is done to the body. So as soon as we open up the body bag, we'll take a couple of photographs. X-rays will be taken. And then a documentation of the external appearance of the body is performed. That would include any type of clothing, jewelry, personal effects that the decedent may have, and then just general appearance of the body. Ms. Dawes, she appeared to be the reported age of 21 years old. She was 5 foot 3 inches and 120 pounds. And other than injuries that we'll get into later pertaining to gunshot wounds, she was well developed and normal appearing.
Okay. Was there any evidence of treatment on her body?
There was.
Okay, and what was that?
There was an intravenous catheter that was inserted into her left arm. She had a short horizontal thoracotomy incision that was made into each lateral aspect of the chest.
Can you talk to us about what that means?
Yeah, that's, Ms. Dawes had made it to the hospital, so there was evidence of treatment by the hospital in order to resuscitate her. The intravenous catheter is essentially to get fluids into the body, to replenish fluids, blood loss. And then the thoracotomy incisions that were made into the chest, those are essentially to assess for any type of blood or fluids that may be in the chest cavity, and to correct any type of pneumothorax or abnormal air pressures in the chest cavity.
So you mentioned earlier evidence of injury. Did you see any evidence of injury to her body?
I did.
Okay, can you describe that for us?
Sure. There were 5 gunshot wounds of the body, and then there were also pseudo-stippling injuries on various parts of her body.
Okay, so let's start at the top. You said 5 gunshot wounds, if you can describe them for us. Now, before we get started, you labeled each one with a number in your report. But does that indicate to you, at what point that injury was sustained by the victim?
No, the numbering is completely arbitrary. It doesn't necessarily indicate that that was the first one or the order in which they were sustained. And neither does it indicate the severity of that wound.
Okay. So let's start with gunshot wound number 1. Can you describe to us where it was located?
Yes, the entrance wound, gunshot wound number 1, was on the lateral right aspect of the neck. And then the corresponding exit wound for that was on the left side of the neck, just below the jaw.
Okay. And you mentioned stippling, pseudo-stippling. Was there anything on this particular injury?
Yes, there was. On the right side of the face, kind of over the right ear and the lateral aspect of the neck, there were many punctate abrasions and superficial lacerations that were consistent with pseudo-stippling.
What is pseudo-stippling?
There's a couple of things that we talk about as it pertains to firearm injuries, stippling and pseudo-stippling. True stippling is actually fragments of gunpowder, unburnt gunpowder, maybe even little fragments of the projectile itself that come off and tattoo on the skin. Pseudo-stippling are secondary projectiles, so that usually indicates that the projectile has first traveled through another object, such as a door, window, glass, something to that effect. And those little fragments of whatever object it went through are now abrading and injuring the skin.
What kind of injuries did this particular gunshot wound cause?
So this projectile, it went through the soft tissues and musculature of the neck. It went through the tongue, and then went through the soft tissues and musculature of the left side of the neck.
Okay. And can you tell us about the gunshot wound, the exit gunshot wound?
Yes, the exit gunshot wound was on the left side of the neck, just below the angle of the jaw.
With regard to the type of injury that this would have caused, would this been fatal injuries? Is something that she could have survived?
Both. It could have certainly been fatal from blood loss, but with rapid medical attention, none of the great vessels were injured, so it's possible if it was just that gunshot wound and prompt medical attention, she may have survived.
Can you talk to us about the trajectory of the wound?
Yes, the trajectory is going from the right side of the body to the left side of the body, from the back side of the body to the front side of the body, and slightly downward.
Was there any kind of projectile or fragments recovered from that particular wound?
No.
Let's move on to gunshot wound number 2. Where did that strike her?
Gunshot wound number 2, the entrance wound was on the back right side of the neck, and then the exit wound was on the posterior left aspect of the neck.
Okay. Any stippling, pseudo-stippling on this wound?
No.
What kind of injuries did gunshot wound number 2 cause?
This projectile that went through the soft tissue and musculature of the neck, it actually fractured the fourth cervical vertebral body, which is part of the spine. It created bleeding around this segment of the spinal cord, and then also damaged the spinal cord itself.
How about the exit?
The exit was on the posterior left aspect of the neck.
The trajectory of this wound?
Is going right to left, front to back, and downward.
Any projectile or fragments associated with this wound?
No.
Gunshot wound number 3, where was it located?
3 was on the anterior aspect of the left shoulder, and the projectile was lodged within the subcutaneous tissue.
And I'm sorry, let's go back to gunshot wound number 2. Was that something that would have been fatal, or was that something that she could survive?
That's a fatal injury.
All right, so you're describing gunshot wound number 3. Describe the location for us. Any stippling or pseudo-stippling associated with this wound?
No.
Okay. What kind of injuries did it cause?
That projectile just went into the musculature of the shoulder where it was recovered.
Okay. Any exit with this wound?
No.
And was there any projectile fragments in this wound?
Yes.
Can you describe it for us?
Yes, there was an apparent medium caliber projectile that was recovered from the musculature of the left shoulder.
Okay. And the trajectory of this wound?
Front to back, slightly right to left, and downward.
Gunshot wound number 3, was it fatal or something that was survivable?
That's a survivable injury.
Okay. Gunshot wound number 4, where was it located?
4 is on the left upper arm, and that was a graze wound.
Okay. Any stippling or pseudo-stippling on that wound?
No.
And when you say a graze wound, what does that mean?
It's superficially grazing the body, so it doesn't actually penetrate deep into the soft tissues.
Okay. So no entry and exit associated with that?
No, it's a shallow injury that just creates typically an oval type defect.
Okay. And would that have been survivable?
Yes.
Okay. And finally, gunshot wound number 5, where was it located?
5 is on the entrance wound is on the back side of the right forearm.
Okay. And what kind of injury did it cause?
It went through the soft tissue and musculature of the forearm and fractured one of the long bones of the forearm and then exited.
Okay. Any stippling or pseudo-stippling associated with that wound?
Not specifically, no.
Any projectiles or fragments associated with that wound?
Yes, there was a small fragment of projectile that was recovered from the muscle of the forearm.
Okay. And the trajectory on that wound?
It's going from the back side to the front side, slightly right to left, and slightly down.
And were there any other injuries that you noted during the course of your autopsy?
Yes.
And what were they?
Those are the pseudo-stippling injuries that we discussed about earlier. Essentially on the entire right upper extremity, which would include the upper arm and the forearm, there were areas of pseudo-stippling. And then on the left hand, kind of in between the index finger and the thumb, there were some abrasions and contusions.
Okay. Now, when you perform an autopsy on somebody, are you made aware of any kind of either facts or information related to that individual's death?
Typically, yes.
Okay. And what information were you aware of in this particular case?
In this particular one, we were aware that it was a police-involved shooting.
Okay. And were you made aware that she was inside the vehicle at the time of her death?
Yes.
Okay. And so as pertains to the pseudo-stippling that you know in the report, is that consistent with, and I think you had probably mentioned this before, glass being on the skin?
Yes, that would be consistent with particles of glass striking the skin.
There's a section in your report that It talks about history that you received, is that the information that you were discussing as far as information that you received about the person?
Yes, under the findings section.
Yes, sir. And where does that information come from?
It can come from numerous sources. Typically, it's the investigating agency, hospitals, family, first responders.
Okay, and is that information always true or accurate based upon your experience?
It's typically a work in progress. It's initial information that we received, and sometimes that information changes.
What other work did you do in this autopsy? Did you collect any evidence?
Yes.
Okay, what else?
So the evidence that I collected at the time of autopsy collected bags that covered the hands. That's pretty typical for these type of cases. It's to preserve evidence. So I take those bags and submit them as evidence. We collected a gunshot residue kit, a blood standard, a hair standard, and the projectile that was recovered and the fragment of projectile that was recovered.
Okay, and so you also did an internal examination. Was there anything of note with regard to that?
Other than the injuries associated with the gunshot wounds, no.
When we were going through the gunshot wounds, I had you describe the trajectory of each wound. Can you, first of all, tell the jury what that means and the importance of that?
Whenever we talk about trajectory, especially in a medical examiner setting, it's really describing the relationship of the firearm to the body. So as long as that relationship is maintained, then any number of scenarios could be possible for a wound. That relationship, as long as it's maintained, you can rotate in a three-dimensional axis, and that gives you the trajectory of the bullet.
Did you also perform toxicology on the body?
We did.
And what were the results of that?
We detected methamphetamine and its metabolite, and then metabolites of heroin, and also diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl.
Okay. And with regard to the many autopsies that you performed, in your experience, you have any opinion as to the level of these drugs that were detected in your system?
I don't.
Now, as part of your autopsy, did you also take some photographs?
I did.
Let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits number 121 through 134. State's 121 is already in evidence for record purposes. If you could tell me whether or not these are the photographs that you took during the course of your autopsy of Genevive Dawes.
They are.
Are they fair and accurate depictions of her body when you performed your autopsy on that day?
Yes.
Have they been changed or altered in any way?
No.
This time the state's going to offer State Exhibit number 121 for all purposes and 122 through 134 for all purposes as well. With the exclusion of 126, y'all.
We object to all of these photographs being irrelevant to the indictment and under Rule 403.
The objections are overruled. I'll give you a running objection to each and every one of those photographs.
And we offer 126 for record purposes on the judge.
126 will be received for record purposes.
Permission purposes of the jury.
It's granted.
So 121, what are we looking at there?
This is an identification shot of the decedent, of Ms. Dawes. After evidence has been taken, the body has been cleaned, then we'll take an identification photograph.
122, states 122, what is that a photograph of?
This is a photograph of the right side of the face and neck, and that's demonstrating gunshot wound number 1 beneath the left ear. That's the right ear, sorry. That's the entrance wound.
And you talked about pseudo-stippling. Do we see some of that in this photograph as well?
We do.
$123.
This is a picture of the left side of the neck and head, and this is gunshot wound number 1 exit.
There appears to be a dark ring around that gunshot wound. What is that?
It's an abrasion caused by the bullet exiting, and my interpretation of that is that it's likely due to the skin abrading the left shoulder, approximating gunshot wound number 3 entrance.
States exhibit number 124.
This is the posterior right aspect of the neck, kind of right around the hairline, and this is the entrance wound for gunshot wound number 2.
$125.
This is the posterior left aspect of the neck, and this is exit of gunshot wound number 2.
So exhibit number 127.
This is a picture of the left shoulder, and the wound above the sticker, the white sticker, is the entrance of gunshot wound number 3.
You testified previously that was associated with gunshot wound number 2 as well, is that correct?
I believe that that's possible, yes.
And why do you believe that they're associated?
The exit of gunshot wound 1 has that dried abrasion around it. That's usually indicating a shored type exit. So in order for that to work, my opinion is that the head was turned to the left, and so the exit of 1 is now approximating the entrance of 3. And so the bullet is likely exiting the left side of the neck and then re-entering to the left shoulder. And then if we look at gunshot wound number 3, if we look at gunshot wound number 3, the abrasion around it is very irregular.
I think I said gunshot wound number 2. For the record, it's gunshot wound number 1. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. That's exit of gunshot wound number 1.
And so you kind of described how the positioning was consistent with something like this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would that be consistent with somebody in the car looking backwards as they're reversing?
Yes.
States exhibit number 128.
That's gunshot wound number 3 entrance on the anterior aspect of the left shoulder.
State exhibit number 129.
A photograph of the projectile that was recovered from the left shoulder.
State exhibit number 130.
This is a photograph of the left upper arm, and it's demonstrating the graze wound number 4.
State Exhibit number 131.
This is a picture, a photograph of the right upper extremity, so the arm and the forearm, and it's demonstrating all the pseudo-stippling, all those irregular abrasions along the arm, and then also down at the bottom portion of the forearm is gunshot wound number 5 entrance.
There also appears to be an incision here on the torso. Is that the evidence of treatment that you were discussing?
Correct. That's the thoracotomy incision.
State Exhibit number 132.
That's a close-up picture of the gunshot wound number 5 entrance on the right forearm.
State Exhibit number 133.
A picture again of the right forearm, and this is the exit gunshot wound number 5.
And finally, State Exhibit number 134.
These are fragments of projectile that I recovered from the musculature of the right forearm.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted into evidence as State Exhibits number 104 and 105.
And tell me whether or not you recognize what these are.
Yes, I do.
And what are they?
These are the envelopes that I place the projectiles in, and then they get submitted to evidence.
Okay, so just for the record, State Exhibit number 104 is going to be the projectile removed from the left shoulder,
Correct.
and 105 is going to be the projectile removed from the right forearm.
Correct.
Now, Doctor, do you have an opinion as to the cause of Genevive Dawes' death?
I do.
And what is it?
Gunshot wounds of the neck.
And do you have an opinion as to the manner of her death?
I do.
And what is that?
Homicide.
Is death, is that considered serious bodily injury?
It's the ultimate serious bodily injury.
And being shot by a firearm, is that bodily injury, or could that cause death?
It can.
Is the gun, a firearm, is that considered a deadly weapon?
Yes.
Is there anything based upon either your external or internal examination of Ms. Dawes that would have caused her not to live a normal life except for the gunshot wounds?
No.
Did you also complete a report of your autopsy?
I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State Exhibit number 135.
Is that a true and accurate copy of your autopsy report in this case?
Yes.
And would it aid the jury in understanding your testimony today about the autopsy that you performed?
It would.
State offers State Exhibit number 135.
No objection.
135 is admitted for all purposes. You may publish.
Thank you. When I asked you about whether or not you saw anything internally that would not cause her to live a normal life, I was referring to illness or death. Did she have any kind of illness or death that would have caused her death?
There were no abnormalities of organs or things of that nature that would have shortened her, I would have expected to shorten her lifespan.
And would being shot by a firearm, would that cause pain?
Yes.
Thank you, doctor. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Fishburne,
Yeah, approach the witness.
you may.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Doctor, I want to show you some documents that have been given to us by the state and ask you if these have anything to do with you performing your duties in this case.
Well, the first 3 pages are our internal investigative narrative, and then the 4th page is my cause of death report.
So you would have seen these documents or the contents of them, right?
I would have seen the first 3 pages. The 4th page is a document that was generated by myself.
So you know that S.W. Jones called back and added that the deceased had a
Does
heroin.
anyone object to hearsay and then testify from the record that's not in evidence?
Objection sustained.
Would you read that to yourself?
Not out loud. Just to yourself.
Okay.
Did you read this before?
I would have read the investigative narrative, yes.
All right, so this would have been included in that.
Should have been, yes.
And it would have been something you considered in doing your duties as a pathologist in this case?
Sure.
All right. Be something you would have relied on and used in conducting all of this that you've done, right?
It's a document that I would read and take into consideration as I do the autopsy, yes.
All right. The office, that's exhibit number 30.
An object to hearsay, Your Honor, and this also has markings all over it.
Please. I bring it up.
Yes, please. The objection to defendant's exhibit number 30 is sustained.
In the toxicology that you did, you found that Ms. Dawes had methamphetamine and heroin in her system, is that correct?
That's correct.
And have you heard the term speedball?
I have.
And would a combination of methamphetamine and heroin be considered to be a speedball?
Objection with relevance, Your Honor.
Overruled. You can answer.
I don't know. The speedball that I'm familiar with is mainly heroin and cocaine.
And you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that the purpose for an addict to combine?
I'm going to object to the characterization of the victim as an addict, Your Honor.
Are you characterizing? Well, the objection sustained. Rephrase your question.
The reason that a person would combine those two drugs, cocaine and heroin, or methamphetamine and heroin, is to intensify the high. Would that be correct?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
I don't know why a person would do a certain thing regarding drugs.
Do you know the effects of combining those two drugs?
On a particular person, no.
Do you know generally?
Well, you have two different mechanisms. Heroin is a depressant and methamphetamine is a stimulant.
And so that would intensify the high that one would get, isn't that right?
I don't know.
And would it be fair to say that combining two drugs like that could cause unpredictable side effects?
Objection, speculation.
If you know the answer, based on your expertise, you can answer the question, but if you don't, then say that you can't.
Yeah, I don't know what side effects it would have produced in Ms. Dawes.
Do you know what sort of high methamphetamine alone would give a person?
As a general class of drug, it's a stimulant, but how it reacts in any given individual, I don't know.
Highly addictive?
I don't know. Again, it's a subjective.
And heroin. Heroin is a street drug, right?
It is.
Same with methamphetamine, right?
It is.
Illegal?
Yes.
You were given information, doctor, that you relied on, that Ms. Dawes did have a heroin addiction. Is that correct?
I'm
Objection, relevance.
not sure what you mean by rely on.
Objection's overruled.
Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by rely on.
Has this been a part of the information you relied on?
I don't rely on the information. I take it into consideration as I do my autopsy exam.
So you took this information into consideration?
Correct.
So you received information that you took into consideration that Ms. Dawes was suffering from heroin abuse?
That's part of the information that we were given, yes.
Now, we have 5 gunshot wounds, correct?
Correct.
And there's no way to tell which one was first, correct?
Not with 100% accuracy, no.
So we have about 126 permutations of possibilities, correct?
I guess if you say so.
Okay. So, would Ms. Dawes have been ambulatory after gunshot wound number 5?
She could have been if that was sustained first.
Okay? If that were sustained first. How about gunshot wound number 4? Would she have been ambulatory if that had been sustained first?
Yes.
How about gunshot wound number 3? Would she have been ambulatory if that had been sustained first?
Yes. If gunshot 3 was a standalone injury.
Okay. How about, let's skip to gunshot number 1. Would she have been ambulatory after gunshot number 1?
Maybe or maybe not. I don't know.
But she definitely was not ambulatory after number 2, correct? If that had been, well, if that had been in any order.
Well, I don't know if she was ambulatory at all during any of these gunshot wounds, but certainly not after number 2.
What does ambulatory mean to you?
Walking.
Walking. How about moving around, being able to do things?
When I think of ambulating, I usually think of walking around and purposeful movement.
Would she been able to drive after gunshot number 5 was the first?
Sure.
She'd been able to drive it. Gunshot number 4 had been first.
Sure.
How about number 3?
Yes.
How about number 1?
Maybe or maybe not. I don't know.
How about number 2?
I would say no.
Now, when you say homicide in your report, you're not using that as a legal term like we're using it in court this week, right?
No.
What sort of term is it to you?
For us, for our purposes in the medical, legal, forensic community, homicide implies death at the hands of another person.
So, and death at the hands of another person, however, could be totally justified, correct?
If the court deems it to be so, yes.
Now, you testified that Ms. Dawes had bags on her hands that you collected, is that right?
Correct.
And you turned those in to where?
They get submitted to evidence registration.
Do you know what the purpose of those bags, what they're for?
Yeah, the bags are placed on the hands at the scene or at the hospital, and it's an attempt to preserve any type of evidence that may be on the hands.
Such as gunshot residue?
Gunshot residue, too.
And there were some blood standards done. Was that for DNA?
No, it's for, it can be used for that, but it's typically used to compare, let's say blood was found at a scene. Does that blood match our decedent's blood? So then those two, we have a blood standard that can be compared to blood collected at the scene. See
So
if they
that was
match.
done for that purpose, so we could compare what was, for example, on an item recovered from the scene and Ms. Dawes' blood on her body.
That's one thing that could be used for. It's just our standard to collect a blood standard.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis,
No further questions, Your Honor.
may this witness be finally excused.
No objection.
Very good. Sir, you may stand down. You're excused from any further service on the matter.
Thank
Let
you.
me see the lawyers very quickly. Just want to make sure. Experts? You have another witness, or do you want to do expert? Okay, very good. I'll go ahead and have a seat. Members of the jury, I'm going to let you go home a little bit early today. The reason why is because we're going to do some procedural things that will make sure that tomorrow from here on out there won't be any breaks during the day. I'd rather do a break like this at the end of the day so that I can take care of these things. So tomorrow morning, if you would please be back at 8:30 in the morning. Please have a seat. I'm going to give you some instructions as I have throughout the entire trial. They're not any different. Now that you have heard a couple days worth of testimony, please don't discuss anything that you've heard in court with anybody out of court. Stay away from these locations. Stay away from Google or the internet. Don't do any independent research, and please don't discuss anything that you've heard with anybody at all. Stay off the news. Stay off social media. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:30. So that we can begin testimony at 9. Does that sound good, Ms. Mattson?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. We'll see y'all tomorrow. All rise for the jurors. And let me see the lawyers up here. Ms. Mattson, Mr. Lewis. Y'all may be seated. Court's in recess.